Hi there everyone. My presentation today is about Helen Sewell. She illustrated many famous works that kind of surprised me. She illustrated Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. She also did Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. She did a lot of the Little House on the Prairie illustrations as well. And another one I want to highlight, because we're going to be reading from the book today, is The Thanksgiving Story. She illustrated that, and that book is by Alice Dalglish. Helen Moore Sewell was born in 1896 in Mare Island, California. Her father is a Navy commander who travels the world, and her mother passed away when she was very young, probably young enough she didn't remember her at all. Her father was actually the governor of Guam for a very short period, but he passed away right before Helen's 8th birthday. So Helen and her two sisters went to live with her aunt and uncle after that, and she in Brooklyn. So around the age of 12, she became the youngest person ever to be admitted to the Pratt Institute, which is very interesting to me because she did it for her artistry skills. She wanted to be an artist. So she studied under Russian artist Alexander Archipenko, who really influenced all of her works from that time forward. Her first works were Christmas cards and greeting cards, and she even wrote some of her own books, which is very interesting. She passed away in 1957 after writing 72 book illustrations in New York, and she passed away from some health issues she'd been fighting off for a while. So that's kind of the summary of Helen's life, and now I want to read to you from The Thanksgiving Story. This is one of her illustrations, very beautiful. And we're going to be doing New Homes in a New Land. The winter was not a cold one, but it seemed long to the settlers. Many of them were sick, many of them died. It was a sad time for everyone. Some people stayed on the ship and others went ashore to work. They took with them some boards they had brought on the ship. They also cut down trees and made rough boards. First they built a house to hold food, and some of the sick people stayed in this house. There were two smaller houses. One was used to keep supplies, and one was for the sick people. One terrible night, the thatched roof of the larger house caught fire. From the Mayflower, Giles, Constance, and Damaris could see the flames. These three characters are three little children, pilgrims that came across on the Mayflower. They're one of the first settlers. The men on shore put out the fire. With a great deal of hard work, the men built 7 small houses. Now the Hopkins family had a home of their own, and at last spring came. Here is an illustration that Helen Sewell did. Very colorful, very intricately designed so that children understand the depth of the unknown world to these settlers. There were new leaves on the trees and flowers in woods and fields. Birds sang in the trees. The country was no longer cold and wintry and bare. It was green and friendly and beautiful. Almost everyone was weak and thin, for there had been so much sickness and not enough to eat. But weather for planting seeds was coming. Giles, Constance, and Damaris were happy to be out in the spring sunshine. Ever since they had landed, the settlers had been finding new trees and plants in this new land. They also found many trees and flowers that they had known in England. They told each other about them as if they were meeting old friends. Here are oaks and walnut and birch trees, ash and wild cherry and plum, and here are strawberries and watercress. As you can see, the leaves that Helen has illustrated are the ones mentioned. So that's interesting. In April, the Mayflower went back to England. Now the settlers were alone in the new country. Alone, except for the Indians. Sometimes the settlers saw smoke from Indian fires. They saw Indians, too. But the Indians always ran away. One day, a tall Indian walked right into the village and spoke to the settlers in English. He had learned it from some of the sea captains who'd come to that part of the country. His name was Samoset. The people of Plymouth were surprised to see that the Indian wore so few clothes. It was still cold weather, and how could he have only that little piece of leather around his waist? They gave him an old coat. Later he brought another Indian named Squanto, who spoke better English, because he had been taken to England on a ship. The two told the pilgrims why there were so few Indians in that part of the country. Many of them had died of a sickness. It was fine to have a friendly Indian there in the daytime, but when night came, the settlers wished he would go away. He stayed, so they let him sleep in the Hopkins house, but watched him all night. Did Giles, Constance, and Damaris stay awake wondering about their strange visitor? We don't know. After this, the Indian chief, Massasoit, came for a visit. The people of Plymouth made a place for the chief outside one of the houses they were building. They put boards and blankets on the ground and a green rug and cushions for Massasoit to sit on. The Indians came to the meeting wearing leggings of deerskin. Their faces and bodies were painted in bright colors. The chief was painted dark red, and he wore a necklace of white beads. The settlers went to the meeting in their best clothes, with a trumpet and drums. The governor wore a red sash and a feather in his hat. The settlers gave the Indian chief 2 shining knives and a copper chain to hang around his neck. Massasoit promised to be friendly. When his people came to Plymouth, they would not bring bows and arrows with them. The promise of friendship was kept for 50 years. Squanto, the friendly Indian, stayed in Plymouth. He showed the settlers how to plant corn in the Indian way. The Indians put small dead fish in each place where the seed was planted. This fertilized the corn and helped it grow. That year, men, women, and children worked hard, planting, and that year there was a good crop of corn. Everyone gathered to work and gather the harvest. That's just one chapter out of this Thanksgiving storybook, but I want to show you my favorite illustration, which is at the end of the book when they're all celebrating the big harvest that was brought in. As you can see, the description of the Indians is very close to what the storyteller did, so Helen really accentuated the details of the illustrations to what the author wanted. And I really liked that. So Helen Sewell is a wonderful example of what an illustrator should be. They should cater to their authors and the people around them. This book is a very fun one for me. I totally enjoyed it, and I totally researched a lot about Helen Sewell that you'll have to read about in my pamphlet as well. The activity that I want children to work on is a poster. So I created a mini poster to kind of show you an example of what I'm thinking the children should do. I want children to choose whether they want to do a pilgrim or an Indian, and I want them to choose one Thanksgiving food that they really love. They will learn the importance of how we have Thanksgiving to this day, why we celebrate it, and be thankful that the pilgrims risked their lives to bring us our freedom. So, this is just an example of what the poster should look like. I did not put Indians on here, but they are more than welcome to do that. I picked some foods that I think would go on my Thanksgiving table, so I picked corn on the cob, I picked turkey, and I picked sweet potatoes. There could be other things that you love to eat on your Thanksgiving dish. So I want the children to pick one dish that they absolutely love and put on their table. This is a class project, so the poster is going to be a lot bigger. Remember that. And then I want them to pick either Pilgrim or Indian to look up and cut out and paste onto here, kind of like I've done. So these are some children over here and what they may have looked like and how they may have dressed. And this is one of the adults. They can do Indians as well. Since the illustrations kind of showed us what it looks like, we can make it close to that. So that's my learning activity. And I'm very excited to have shared about Helen Sewell and some of her illustrations that she's done for us, and gone through one of her books that she did. So thank you so much for listening in.